There is a mushroom that has been eaten for over 1,000 years. It grew from the bark of dead trees in the coldest months of winter. It was gathered by hand in the snow. It was praised by emperors, prescribed by physicians, and carried across mountain ranges in clay pots sealed with wax. Today, you can buy it in any grocery store. But what you are buying is not that mushroom. What you are buying is a ghost, a pale, engineered replica grown in darkness, fed on synthetic nutrients, shaped to be uniform, sterile, and silent. The original, wild, amber, resilient, and deeply rooted in 10 centuries of human survival, has been almost entirely replaced. Not by accident, not by neglect, by design. This is Ancient Food Files, a channel built not to entertain, but to preserve. Every story we uncover here is a story that was meant to disappear. If what we do here matters to you, consider subscribing, not for the algorithm, for the record, for the archive that nobody else is keeping. Before you continue watching, please check the link I provided in this video's description. That way, you can verify it yourself. Now, let us go back. In the mountain forests of central China, along the river valleys of Sichuan and Yunnan, there grows a mushroom that the Chinese have called Jin Zhen Gu, golden needle mushroom, for longer than most nations have existed. Its scientific name is Flammulina velutipes. The species epithet means velvety foot. This is accurate. The wild version has a cap the color of burnt honey, sometimes deep amber, sometimes nearly rust. The stem is thick and firm, darkening toward the base where it grips the wood. It grows in clusters from the rotting trunks of Chinese hackberry and willow trees, emerging not in spring or summer, but in the cold, in frost, sometimes beneath snow. This is not coincidence. The enoki mushroom is built for winter. It fruits when other fungi retreat. It claims the season that nothing else will take. The Chinese recognized this centuries ago. They did not simply eat it, they studied it. The Tang dynasty physician Sun Simiao, writing in the 7th century, documented its properties with the precision of someone who had watched it save lives. He noted its effect on the stomach, the liver, the intestines. He noted that it was not merely food, it was medicine that happened to taste like something worth eating. Biologically, Flammulina velutipes is an anomaly. Most mushrooms fruit in warmth and moisture. They are instruments of decay, calibrated to the conditions of abundance. The enoki runs in the opposite direction. Its cold active enzymes continue functioning at temperatures approaching freezing. It produces antifreeze proteins that allow cellular activity to continue where other organisms simply stop. It is, in the truest sense, a survivor of conditions that were never meant to be survived. The mycelium, the underground network of threads from which the mushroom emerges, can persist in dead wood for years. It does not need soil. It does not need warmth. It needs only cellulose, moisture, and time. It will wait. It has always been willing to wait. The fruiting bodies themselves contain compounds that have been studied for decades, polysaccharides, specifically FVP and EA6, which researchers have examined for their effects on immune modulation. Proflamin, a compound unique to this species, has been studied in cellular contexts that will be discussed later in this script. None of this was unknown to the people who first ate it. They did not have the language of molecular biology, but they had something older. They had observation across generations. That is its own form of science. The historical record of enoki is not myth, it is documentation. In 800 CE, during the height of the Tang dynasty, enoki mushrooms were listed among the imperial tribute foods. Ingredients so valued they were transported to the capital from distant provinces. They arrived preserved in salt or dried, packed carefully for a journey of weeks. By the Song dynasty, between 960 and 1279, cultivation had already begun. Farmers in Fujian province were deliberately inoculating hackberry logs with spores, placing them in cool, shaded valleys to fruit through winter. This is not primitive experimentation. This is agricultural knowledge refined over generations, passed between farming families as practical inheritance. In Japan, where the mushroom arrived through trade routes and took the name Enokitake, enoki tree mushroom, it was documented in texts as early as the Heian period. Japanese temple cuisine, the austere vegetarian cooking of Zen Buddhism known as Shojin Ryori, incorporated enoki as a staple. It was a food of discipline and silence, appropriate, given the mushroom's nature. During the famines that accompanied the late Ming dynasty collapse in the 17th century, Wild enoki was among the forage foods that kept rural populations alive through winters that killed harvests and emptied granaries. There are county records, provincial accounts. The mushroom appears in them not as delicacy but as sustenance, as the difference between starvation and survival. And then, in the 20th century, something changed. It did not happen suddenly. These things never do. In the 1920s and 1930s, Japanese agricultural scientists began experimenting with controlled enoki cultivation in enclosed environments. They discovered something that the wild mushroom had never offered: predictability. By controlling temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide levels, and light, by eliminating, essentially, everything that made the wild mushroom itself, they could produce a mushroom that looked nothing like its ancestor. Without light, the cap stayed small and pale. Without space, the stems grew long and thin and clustered together in tight, uniform bundles. Without cold air variation, the color remained white throughout. The new mushroom was clean, consistent, visually striking in a way that markets could sell. It was also, in many of the ways that mattered, a diminished thing. The compounds concentrated in the amber cap of the wild enoki, the pigments, the secondary metabolites, the structures shaped by actual cold and actual exposure, were largely absent. The new mushroom was grown in carbon dioxide-enriched bottles in factory conditions, yielding product that could be packaged and shipped without variation. This was not farming. This was manufacturing. The wild enoki was unmanageable. It fruited when it chose to fruit. It grew on specific wood. It demanded cold that could not always be guaranteed. It could not be scaled without effort. The cultivated white enoki could be scaled infinitely, and so it was. By the 1970s, the industrial model had spread beyond Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, and eventually Europe and North America adopted the bottled cultivation method. The white enoki became the enoki. Most people alive today have never seen the wild form. Most people alive today do not know there is a wild form. This is how erasure works, not through destruction, through replacement, through the creation of a substitute so widely distributed that the original becomes invisible. The original does not disappear from the forest. It disappears from memory, from the market, from the category of things people think to look for. The wild Flammulina veludipes still grows. It still fruits in winter from dead wood along cold rivers. It still contains everything it ever contained, but it is unowned. It cannot be patented. It cannot be standardized. It does not arrive in a neat plastic sleeve with a weight guarantee. What cannot be owned cannot survive modern systems of distribution. What cannot be standardized cannot be sold at scale. This is not a conspiracy. It is simply the logic of a particular kind of economy applied to a living thing that was not built to submit to it. The science did not stop when the wild form was replaced. In 2001, a study published in the International Journal of Cancer examined proflamin, a compound derived from enoki mushrooms, in relation to cellular behavior in laboratory conditions. The findings were careful and qualified, as good science always is, but they were also notable. Researchers in Singapore, led by Dr. Ito Tetsuro among others, had observed over decades that communities consuming significant quantities of enoki mushrooms appeared, in population data, to have lower rates of certain cancers. The sample was a single family of farmers in Nagano Prefecture. The observation was not clinical proof, but it became a thread, and that thread was followed. Further studies examined the polysaccharide complexes in the mushroom's cell walls, the cold active proteins, the antiproliferative compounds. The work continued through the 2000s and 2010s. None of it arrived at headlines. None of it produced a pharmaceutical product, in part because the compounds in question resist simple isolation. They appear to operate in concert with other elements of the mushroom's structure, an interdependence that defeats the single compound model that pharmaceutical research requires. The mushroom had always worked as a whole. It did not offer itself in parts. In Japan, there is a particular kind of grief attached to the enoki that few outside that culture understand fully. The wild mushroom, enokitaki, was a winter food, a cold weather food, a food that people gathered themselves or bought from farmers they knew. During the post-war period of rapid industrialization, when Japan rebuilt itself on concrete and efficiency, wild food gathering became associated with poverty, with hardship, with the life people were trying to leave behind. The white cultivated enoki, bright, clean, modern, sold in convenience stores, was the food of the new Japan. The wild mushroom was the food of the old one. Younger generations adopted the white form without question. They had no memory of the other. Their grandparents' knowledge of foraging, of hackberry groves and cold river valleys and the particular smell of wild enoki in December, went unspoken and then unremembered. This is the mechanics of cultural forgetting. It does not require force, it requires only that the new generation see the old knowledge as unnecessary, as backward, as something to be grown out of. The knowledge did not die, but it aged without passing, and in a generation or two, that is close enough to the same thing. We are living through a period in which the fragility of industrial food systems is no longer theoretical. Climate instability has disrupted growing seasons on every continent. Monoculture agriculture has accelerated soil degradation at rates that soil scientists describe with language they rarely use publicly. Cold chains fail. Supply lines fracture. The single variety, single condition, single source model of food production, the model that replaced the wild enoki with the bottled one, is revealing its limits in ways that are becoming difficult to ignore. The wild enoki was already prepared for this. It grows in cold, it grows in winter, it grows on dead wood in disturbed forests, exactly the kind of landscape that follows ecological collapse. It does not need what modern agriculture needs. It needs what is left when modern agriculture has passed through. It is not a solution to what is coming. Nothing simple is, but it is a reminder that for a very long time, human beings ate things that the land produced without arrangement, without ownership, without instruction, and that those things were, in many cases, sufficient. The knowledge of the wild enoki was never truly lost. It is held in the memory of old farmers in Nagano and Yunnan who still know which trees to check in November. It is held in the herbals and agricultural records of the Tang and Song dynasties, in documents that have survived wars and floods and the burning of libraries. It is held in the mycelium itself, threading through the bark of hackberry trees along frozen rivers, patient in the way that only things without consciousness can be patient. Nature does not require our memory to persist. It does not ask permission to fruit. It does not wait for us to rediscover it. It waits only for cold and wood and time. Three things it has always had in abundance. What was buried was not the mushroom. It was our attention, our willingness to look at something inconvenient and unownable and see value in it anyway. That attention can be recovered. It always could be. If this archive matters to you, if preserving what was almost lost is something you believe in, subscribe to Ancient Food Files, not for the numbers, for the record.